You've probably heard it a million times. Fail early, fail often.
Oh, yeah. It's like the official mantra of modern business at this point.
Right. It's printed on coffee mugs, it's on T-shirts in Silicon Valley, and, I mean, it is repeated in basically every keynote speech at every startup conference.
It's everywhere.
But what if I told you that failing at your first business gives you the exact same statistical chance of success on your next try as someone who has literally never started a business before?
Which is just a profound realization, honestly.
It totally is.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I am sitting across from a massive, just powering stack of notes and transcripts, and they all point back to one of the most paradigm-shifting business books out there, Rework, by Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson.
And if you've been following the world of software or just business strategy in general, you know these concepts are legendary.
Oh, absolutely. But today, our mission is to go way beyond the surface. We are going to completely dismantle almost everything you've ever been taught about productivity, competition, and work culture. Right, and then we're going to rebuild it using a set of highly counterintuitive, battle-tested principles. Because whether you're running a massive company or, navigating a traditional 9-to-5 or just trying to finish that side project in your garage, these insights are engineered to cut through the info overload.
We're cutting straight to what actually works. And I'm so pumped for this because the concepts we're exploring today sound absolutely wild on the surface.
They really do.
Like, we're going to look at why you should explicitly underdo your competition.
Yeah, intentionally do less.
Exactly. And why attending a 1-hour meeting with 10 people actually destroys an entire workday. Plus, why words like just and easy are absolute poison to your team's culture.
But to build this new framework, we first have to clear away the mental clutter.
Right.
We have to tear down the foundational myths that hold people back.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the ultimate defense mechanism, which is the concept of the real world.
Oh, man, the real world fallacy.
You know exactly what this looks like. You bring a fresh, exciting, maybe slightly radical idea to a colleague or a manager, and they lean back, cross their arms, sigh, and say, well, that sounds great in theory, but that would never work in the real world.
It's a phrase used exclusively as a weapon.
Yes.
What's so fascinating when you dig into the psychology of this is that the real world isn't an actual place. It's not this objective reality with fixed laws of physics. It's simply an excuse for pessimism.
It's a justification for not trying.
Exactly. The people who inhabit this so-called real world, they expect fresh concepts to fail because those concepts threaten their established order.
It's pure cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Because think about it. If your new agile way of doing things actually works, it implies that their old, slow, bureaucratic way is obsolete.
And nobody wants to admit they've been wasting their time.
Right. They want to drag you down into their, tomb of despair because your ambition highlights their complacency.
Precisely. And when you look at the company built by the authors of Rework, they fail the real-world test in basically every conceivable metric.
Oh, completely.
In the real world, you supposedly can't have a small team of employees spread out across multiple time zones on different continents without a central headquarters.
Nope, not allowed.
You supposedly can't attract millions of users without a dedicated sales team or some massive advertising budget. And you definitely can't reveal your exact formula for success, like your internal code, to your competitors.
But they did all of that.
They did all of it, and they thrived.
So when someone says that won't work in the real world, what they're actually saying is that won't work in my world.
Exactly.
You don't have to live there. You can build your own parameters. Which brings us back to that mind-blowing statistic I mentioned at the top of the show, the whole Silicon Valley obsession with failure.
Yeah, the fetishization of failure is one of the most dangerous myths we're covering today. The prevailing wisdom insists that failure builds character, right? That it's this necessary rite of passage.
Right, like, I learned so much from my bankruptcy, or that failed app taught me everything I know. You hear it everywhere.
You do, but the data tells a completely different story.
The numbers just completely destroy the narrative.
They really do. There's this Harvard Business School study that looked at the subsequent success rates of entrepreneurs. If you have already run a successful company, your chance of succeeding with your next venture is 34%.
Okay, so you have a distinct mathematical advantage.
You do. But what about the people who failed the first time? The ones who supposedly gathered all those valuable character-building lessons from their mistakes.
Right. Logically, you would assume their success rate goes up. because now they supposedly know all the traps to avoid.
You would think so.
Yeah?
But their follow-on success rate is exactly the same as people starting a company for the very first time.
Which is what, 23%?
Exactly, 23%. Failing previously gives you zero statistical advantage over someone who has literally never tried before.
That is wild. Zero advantage. But I guess if we break down the mechanics of why that is, it actually makes perfect sense. Like, what do you actually learn from a mistake?
You only learn what not to do again.
Right.
You learn that a specific pricing model didn't work or a specific marketing channel was too expensive. But knowing what not to do still doesn't tell you what you should do next.
You're still fumbling in the dark.
Exactly. Contrast that with success. When something succeeds, you know exactly what worked. You have a proven mechanism.
You have real ammunition.
Right, ammunition that you can replicate, scale, and prove upon.
I love the analogy the source uses here regarding evolution. Nature does not linger on its past failures. Evolution doesn't sit around analyzing the skeletal remains of the dodo bird holding like a post-mortem meeting.
No, it doesn't.
It builds exclusively and ruthlessly upon what worked. Success is the only experience that actually propels you forward.
Which perfectly sets up the next casualty on our list of business myths, the long-term business plan. Because if success is the only thing that teaches us what works, then the entire concept of a 5-year business plan is logically absurd. How can you plan for 5 years when you haven't had a single success yet to learn from?
Oh, the sacred business plan. The thick, heavy binder filled with Gantt charts, imaginary market projections, and, 5-year revenue forecasts. It is a work of total fiction.
It really is.
And the argument here is that we need to completely stop calling these things business plans and start calling them what they actually are, which is business guesses.
Yeah, financial guesses.
Yeah.
Strategic guesses.
Exactly.
Because unless you possess clairvoyance, long-term planning is a fantasy. There are infinite variables entirely out of your control. Shifting market conditions, sudden competitor innovations, global economic events.
Writing a plan just gives you this false psychological sense of control.
Right, but it's worse than just being useless. Plans are actively dangerous to an organization.
Because they lock you in.
Yes. Plans let the past drive the future. They act as blinders. You end up in a situation where a team says, well, we have to go in this direction because that's what the plan from 2 years ago says we're supposed to do, even if an incredible, unforeseen opportunity has just appeared right in front of them.
It completely kills improvisation.
It does. And think about the fundamental timing of when a business plan is written.
Usually before you've even started doing anything at all, you're sitting in a coffee shop writing a plan before you have a single customer.
Right. You are making your biggest, most inflexible, overarching decisions at the exact moment when you have the absolute least amount of information you will ever have.
It's totally backwards.
The worst time to make a decision is before you've begun. The optimal approach is to figure out what you are going to do this week, not this year. You make the decision right before you execute it, when your information is the most current and accurate.
It's like packing for a 3-month backpacking trip. People agonize over every tiny item for weeks. But the reality is just get on the plane. If you realize you need a warmer jacket or a different plug adapter when you land, you can just buy it there based on the actual weather you are experiencing.
Right.
Blindly following a plan that has lost its relationship with reality is way scarier than winging it. And speaking of blindly following standard advice, why is growth always the default metric for success?
This raises an incredibly important question about our cultural obsession with scale. When you run a business or even just a department, the first question people inevitably ask is, how big is your team?
Oh, always.
And they are fishing for a big number. If you say 100 people, they nod with deep respect. But if you say 5 people, you get this patronizing, oh, that's nice, you'll get there.
Right. But there's this brilliant counter-argument. We don't look at Harvard or Oxford and say, if Harvard would just open 1,000 franchises and put a campus in every strip mall, then it would be a truly great school. We don't measure the value of a prestigious university by its sheer size or its rate of expansion. So why do we do that with a business?
Because we falsely assume that small is just a stepping stone to big.
Yeah.
But small is a magnificent destination in itself.
Yeah.
When you consciously choose to grow, when you add layers of staff, upgrade to enterprise IT infrastructure, and rent massive office spaces, you are actively choosing to take on complex, heavy headaches.
You build a machine that requires a tremendous amount of fuel just to survive.
Right. Small businesses often secretly wish they were bigger, But massive corporations constantly dream about being agile, flexible, and intimate like they were when they were small.
And shrinking is brutal. Once you bloat up, if the market turns, you have to fire people, which destroys morale and culture. Finding your optimal size and fiercely defending it is a totally valid, powerful choice.
It really is.
But that kind of restraint directly contradicts another incredibly toxic element of modern work culture, which is the celebration of the workaholic.
The hero syndrome.
Yes. The person burning the midnight oil, sending emails at 2 a.m., sleeping under their desk. In our culture, we give that person a medal.
We do.
But we need to look at the actual collateral damage workaholics cause. They don't just hurt themselves, they actively damage the machinery of the business.
They create far more problems than they solve. First off, from a purely biological standpoint, it is entirely unsustainable. The burnout crash is inevitable.
Oh, 100%.
But more importantly, workaholics miss the fundamental point of problem solving. They try to fix complex, nuanced problems by throwing sheer brute force hours at them, rather than stepping back and looking for an elegant, efficient solution. They essentially make up for intellectual laziness with extra hours.
And it warps their judgment completely. If you are perpetually exhausted, your prefrontal cortex is compromised. You are functionally intoxicated.
You're not making sharp strategic decisions.
Right. You end up fixating on totally inconsequential details because your tired brain literally cannot prioritize information anymore. Plus, think about what the workaholic does to the team environment.
It's awful.
They create this incredibly toxic ass-in-seat mentality. They make the highly efficient person who does brilliant work and goes home to their family at 5 p.m. feel guilty.
Yeah, and they often subconsciously create crises just so they can swoop in, work the weekend, put out the fire, and feel like the indispensable hero.
Right.
But the real hero isn't the one sleeping on a cot in the office. The real hero is the person who figured out a faster, smarter way to get the job done and went home.
Okay, so if we toss out the 5-year plans, if we ignore the failures, if we stop worshiping endless growth and 80-hour work weeks, how do we actually build something?
Right, how do we start?
Yeah, how does someone, what the framework calls a starter, rather than the somewhat pretentious term entrepreneur, actually begin to make a dent in the universe?
The most reliable, straightforward, and historically proven path is to simply scratch your own itch.
I absolutely love the mechanics of this concept. When you look at the stories of massive breakthroughs, they almost always start with personal frustration.
They do.
Think about James Dyson. He's vacuuming his house, and he realizes his traditional bag vacuum keeps losing suction. Why? Because the dust is physically clogging the microscopic pores of the paper bag. He didn't discover this problem in a corporate boardroom by analyzing market trends or running a focus group.
No, he discovered it because his own living room floor wasn't getting clean.
Exactly. So he goes out, iterates thousands of times, and invents the world's first cyclonic bagless vacuum.
Or consider Vic Firth, the legendary timpanist for the Boston Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, this is a great story.
He was deeply frustrated because the commercial drumsticks he bought were never perfectly matched. One day, he dropped a handful on the floor and heard that they all produced slightly different pitches when they hit the ground.
Which is a minor annoyance for most people.
Right, but a critical flaw for a master musician. So he started making his own, matching them precisely by moisture content, weight, and pitch. He scratched his own itch, and today, that company produces tens of thousands of premium drumsticks every single day.
And Bill Bowerman, the legendary track coach who wanted lighter, more grippy shoes for his runners, he doesn't commission a chemical engineering study. He literally goes into his kitchen, ruins his family's waffle iron by pouring liquid rubber into it, and the famous Nike waffle sole is born.
It's amazing.
Or Mary Kay Wagner, who bought skincare formulas from a local cosmetologist because they were the exact products she personally used and loved.
What's fascinating here is if we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological and practical advantages of solving your own problem are massive.
Oh, huge.
When you are the target market, you eliminate the latency of feedback. You don't need to hire consultants to tell you if a feature is good. The light just comes on.
You know instantly.
You know instantly whether the solution worked because you are assessing the quality directly, not through the proxy of a customer survey. Furthermore, you fall in love with the grueling process of creation because you intimately understand the real-world value of a solution you're building.
But inevitably, when you tell someone, hey, just start solving your own problems, you hit the ultimate brick wall. The universal excuse. I don't have the time. I have a day job. I have kids. I have a mortgage.
Yeah, the no-time excuse is almost always a psychological defense mechanism.
Interesting.
It's designed to protect the ego from the vulnerability of actually trying and potentially failing. The reality is, there is always enough time if you allocate it deliberately.
Exactly. Are you really saying you have zero time? Because if you look at the average evening routine, the math doesn't add up. Hang on to your day job. Nobody is saying you need to quit and risk your livelihood.
Right, don't do that.
But instead of sitting down to watch 3 hours of prestige television or, doom scrolling social media until midnight, squeeze out a few extra hours for your project, go to bed at 11 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. We aren't talking about pulling agonizing all-nighters.
No, just a few disciplined, focused hours a week is enough to establish a baseline and get momentum moving. Because ideas themselves are cheap. They are a highly abundant, practically worthless commodity. Everyone has an idea for a revolutionary app or a new service. The original idea is a negligible percentage of a successful business. Execution is the separator.
Which reminds me of that brilliant advice from the filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. He would tell aspiring directors to just get a camera, get some cheap film, and shoot a movie of any kind at all, even if it's just a 10-minute short of your friend walking down the street.
Just do it.
Stop talking about the masterpiece script you're going to write someday. The physical act of execution is the only thing that matters. But as you start executing, as you transition from thinking to doing, you have to develop a spine. You have to be willing to draw a line in the sand.
This is a critical inflection point for any starter. A great business or a great project must have an opinion. It must stand for something definitive.
Yes.
And the inescapable reality of standing for something is that you will inevitably alienate some people. If you aren't upsetting anyone, you probably aren't pushing hard enough, and you are almost certainly blending into the background noise.
Think about the stark contrast between a company with an actual soul and a corporate mission statement. Imagine walking into a dingy, depressing rental car office at an airport.
We've all been there.
Right. The carpet is stained, there's no one on the counter, the line is out the door. And pinned to a corkboard behind the desk is this glossy, multi-paragraph mission statement babbling about exceeding customer expectations and synergizing mobility and earning long-term loyalty through exceptional personalized service.
Insulting.
It's so insulting. It's a robot program to say nice things while delivering a genuinely terrible experience.
Now contrast that fake robotic posturing with a company that actually lives its beliefs, even when it actively costs them revenue. Whole Foods is a prime example of this mechanism.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
They drew a very clear line in the sand regarding natural and organic products. They don't waste endless hours in committee meetings debating whether they should stock a new product that contains artificial flavors or high fructose corn syrup.
The answer is just no.
It's an automatic institutional no. You cannot buy a standard Coca-Cola or a Snickers bar at Whole Foods. They absolutely take a financial hit on potential sales from shoppers who want those items. But in return, they earn the fierce, unshakable loyalty of a core demographic who shares their exact values.
I love the hyper-local example of Vinny's Sub Shop in Chicago, too. They are famous for their amazing sandwiches and homemade basil oil. But if you show up at 3:30 p.m., you might find the door locked.
Wait, really?
Yeah, because they buy their bread fresh from a local bakery down the street every single morning. And when the fresh bread runs out, they close the shop.
Why?
They could easily buy cheap, frozen, lower quality bread to sell 100 more sandwiches to the late afternoon crowd, but they refuse to sell food they aren't personally proud of.
By closing early, they aren't just maintaining quality, they are inadvertently creating scarcity and desire. They're telling the customer, our standard is more important than your convenience. It's about avoiding the fatal trap of trying to please everyone.
It's exactly like making friends at a cocktail party. If you walk around the room agreeing with every single person, changing your political opinions, your tastes, and your personality to match whoever is standing in front of you, you probably won't offend a single soul.
But you will be completely, utterly forgettable.
Exactly. To create absolute super fans, you have to be perfectly willing to lose the people who simply don't align with your vision.
But to maintain that uncompromising vision, that vision needs to be grounded in financial reality.
Yeah?
Which brings us to a major warning for anyone building something new. Start a business, not a startup.
Oh, the mythology of the startup.
It's everywhere.
It's this magical, mythical land where revenue is treated as an afterthought, expenses are someone else's problem, and you just burn through millions of dollars of venture capital trying to figure out if your business model actually exists.
It's a fairy tale that ends in a lot of tears. Taking outside money should be viewed as Plan Z. It should be the absolute last resort in your toolkit.
Why is that?
Because the moment you accept venture capital or angel investment, the fundamental mechanics of your company change. You instantly surrender control. You are no longer answering to your customers, you are answering to a board of investors.
The customers immediately slide down the totem pole.
Precisely. And the entire ultimate goal of the enterprise pivots. Investors are not there to help you build a sustainable 20-year legacy. They usually want their money back with massive exponential interest in 3 to 5 years.
So long-term sustainability goes completely out the window.
Right. The objective isn't to build a great product anymore. The objective is to artificially inflate the valuation and cash out. It's often called the investment hangover.
I've heard of that, yeah.
You get that incredible, euphoric, quick buzz of cash hitting the bank account, but a month later, you're sitting in endless board meetings realizing someone else is holding the leash.
A business without a clear, realistic path to profitability isn't a business at all. It's a hobby subsidized by rich people. If you are building a company solely with the intention of flipping it to Google or Facebook in 2 years, you are building to flop.
You aren't actually committed.
You aren't committed to the relationship with your product or your customers. You're writing the prenup on the first date. So assuming we bypass the VCs, we self-fund our small, highly opinionated business by scratching our own itch. How do we actually maintain momentum without getting bogged down by our lack of resources?
This is where you have to undergo a massive mindset shift. You have to learn to embrace constraints.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because our default setting is to complain about constraints. I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, my team is too small, my software is too basic.
Always.
But the reality we are looking at is that less is actually a phenomenal structural advantage. Limited resources are a forcing function for creativity.
Think of a constraint as a structural safeguard against waste and bloat. When you have unlimited resources, you try to solve problems by buying things. More staff, more software, more ads.
Just throwing money at it.
Right.
Right.
When you have nothing, you have to actually invent a solution. The historical examples span multiple disciplines. Shakespeare wrote some of the most brilliant, enduring poetry in the English language entirely within the incredibly strict, suffocating constraints of the 14-line sonnet with the rigid rhyme scheme.
Oh, yeah.
On television, The Price is Right has dominated daytime ratings for decades, using the exact same extremely constrained premise. How much does this household item cost?
And if we look at massive corporate success, look at Southwest Airlines. This is an absolute masterclass in operational constraints. Unlike legacy carriers that fly a dozen different types of aircraft, from Airbus to Boeing to Embraer Southwest, explicitly chose a massive constraint, they only fly Boeing 737s.
So the financial cascade of that single constraint is staggering.
Exactly. Because they only fly 737s, they only need to run one single training program for their mechanics. Every mechanic can work on every single plane. Every pilot is certified for every single route.
It's so smart.
If a plane breaks down in Dallas, they don't have to wait to fly in a specialized Airbus mechanic. Whoever is on duty can fix it. Their spare parts inventory is slashed to a fraction of their competitors. That constraint drastically lowers their operating costs and makes the entire logistical nightmare of running an airline infinitely simpler.
But to utilize constraints effectively, to know what you can cut and what you must keep, you have to accurately identify what is known as the epicenter of your project.
I love this thought experiment. Imagine you decide to open a hot dog stand on a busy city corner. You have the stainless steel cart, the umbrella, the clever name, the relish, the mustard, the buns, and the hot dogs.
Okay.
Now, if someone steals your cart, you can still sell hot dogs out of a cheap styrofoam cooler. If you run out of relish and mustard, some customers might be annoyed, but you still functionally have a hot dog stand. But if you take away the hot dogs, you have absolutely nothing. You cease to exist as a business. The hot dog is the absolute epicenter.
Everything else is secondary decoration. The first and only thing you should worry about perfecting in the beginning is the hot dog. You have to define the absolute core of what you are building. The test is simple. If you can remove a feature, a service, or a visual element, and your product still fundamentally does what it's supposed to do, that feature is not the epicenter.
So to protect that epicenter, you have to actively ignore the details early on. There is a great anecdote about Walt Stanchfield, who was a legendary drawing instructor at Walt Disney Studios.
Oh, I know this one.
He would teach the young animators, and he would force them to draw their initial character sketches with a thick Sharpie marker instead of a fine point pen or a pencil.
It is a brilliant tactile constraint. A thick Sharpie physically prevents the artist from worrying about high-resolution details.
Yeah.
You literally cannot draw perfect eyelashes or subtle shading with a giant, blunt marker. You are forced to nail the basic geometry, the posture, the weight, the big picture.
Which is what actually matters.
Right. In business, when we start projects, we obsess over the eyelashes.
Yeah.
We spend 3 weeks debating font choices, picking out office furniture, or arguing about the perfect software stack. We do it because it feels like work, but it's not. It's procrastination disguised as productivity.
Yes. You are hiding from the hard work of making the actual thing. It's exactly like the endless debates in the music world. Guitar gurus always say tone is in your fingers.
Right.
You can go out and spend $15,000 buying Eddie Van Halen's exact custom guitar, his exact pedals, and his exact vintage amplifier. But if you plug in and play, you are still going to sound exactly like you. And conversely, if Eddie Van Halen picked up a beat-up $50 pawn shop guitar, he would hit one chord and instantly sound like Eddie Van Halen.
The equipment is just a crutch. Tiger Woods in his prime will absolutely destroy an amateur on the golf course, even if he's using cheap, mismatched rental clubs. People obsess over the tools to delay doing the frightening, vulnerable work of finding customers and testing their ideas in the market.
Nail the basics. Play what you've got as well as you can. And as you are playing, keep an eye out for what you are creating by accident. This concept of selling your byproducts absolutely blew my mind when I first realized how prevalent it is.
It's everywhere once you look for it.
The reality is that when you manufacture something, you invariably manufacture something else. When Henry Ford was ramping up production of the Model T, that industrial process generated literal tons of wood scraps and sawdust. Instead of paying to throw it away, he learned how to compress it and turn it into charcoal. That byproduct became Kingsford Charcoal, which is still a massive brand today.
Recognizing a byproduct requires a profound shift in observation. The lumber industry is incredibly efficient at this today. They don't just sell planks. They sell the sawdust, the chips, and the shredded wood for synthetic logs, agricultural mulch, and fuel. Nothing is wasted. But in the modern knowledge economy, our waste is often digital and invisible, so we ignore it.
Think about the band Wilco. They were recording an album, and they had a camera crew filming the process. The album was the main product. But the waste, the hundreds of hours of footage of their creative process, their arguments with the record label, their infighting, was swept up and turned into a highly profitable, critically acclaimed documentary film. I am trying to break your heart.
Even the very source material we are discussing today, the book Rework. The authors were running a software company. The software was their product. But they realized that the knowledge, the unconventional management strategies, and the experience they gained while building that software was a highly valuable byproduct.
They swept up that intellectual waste.
Exactly. They swept it into blog posts. The blog post became a PDF, and the PDF became a physical book that generated millions of dollars and changed the industry. Your process itself is a product.
But to execute on these epicentric ideas, to actually get the hot dog out the door and discover those hidden byproducts, we have to fundamentally rethink how we spend our hours. We have to deconstruct the toxic nature of modern office productivity.
Which begins with confronting what is called the illusion of agreement. In the corporate world, we spend countless hours writing massive, dense reports, blueprints, and requirement documents. But these documents are inherently flawed because they are abstractions.
Right. You know that feeling when you leave a 2-hour kickoff meeting, everyone nods in agreement, and then a week later you realize the marketing team is building a completely different campaign than the engineering team is building.
It happens all the time.
That's the illusion of agreement. If 100 people read a 50-page document, you now have 100 completely different subjective pictures in 100 different heads.
Abstractions hide misunderstandings. Words are open to interpretation, physical reality is not. If we look at the Alaska Airlines example, it provides a perfect countermeasure. They wanted to design a new, highly efficient airport of the future. Instead of just circulating complex architectural blueprints, which executives don't truly visualize accurately anyway, they rented a massive warehouse.
And what did they do?
They took hundreds of cardboard boxes and physically built a full-scale mock-up of the ticket counters and security lines. They walked through it. They tested the passenger flow physically, they removed the abstraction, and got real.
They got the chisel out. It's like the master furniture maker, Sam Maloof. He famously said he couldn't draw a blueprint for a chair because he didn't know how a specific joint would work or how the wood would bend until he actually started working the wood with his tools. You have to remove the layers of abstraction and build a prototype, even a crude one, as fast as humanly possible.
And to build that prototype, to do that deep, meaningful work, you need uninterrupted time. Which brings us to the true ultimate enemy of productivity in the modern office environment, which is the constant, culturally accepted interruptions.
Just think about your own life. When do you actually get the most intense, high-quality work done? For almost everyone, it's either early in the morning before anyone else gets to the office, late at night when the house is asleep, or when you are trapped in seat 14D on an airplane without Wi-Fi. Why? Because you are safely locked in the alone zone.
If we look for a biological equivalent to understand the cognitive cost of interruptions, the concept of REM sleep is the perfect metaphor. You don't just lay down, close your eyes, and instantly drop into deep restorative REM sleep.
All right, it takes time.
Your brain has to cycle through lighter stages first. It takes time. And if just as you are entering REM, someone bumps your shoulder or a car alarm goes off, you wake up. When you go back to sleep, you don't magically pick up right where you left off. The clock resets. You have to start the entire multi-stage cycle over again.
Deep work functions exactly the same way. You need 20 to 30 minutes just to load the context of a complex problem into your working memory. You're opening tabs, you're reviewing notes, you're getting into the flow state. But in a typical office, you get 45 minutes of work, and then a colleague taps you on the shoulder to ask a quick question. Boom. The cognitive clock resets. Then you get 20 minutes of focus, and there's a mandatory team lunch. Clock resets. Then a Slack notification that you feel obligated to answer. Clock resets. You spend 8 exhausting hours at the office, but you only accumulate maybe 1 or 2 hours of actual fragmented work.
Interruption is not collaboration. It is a tax on cognition. The solutions require radical boundaries. You might institute no-talk Thursdays, where no internal communication is allowed, or establish a rule that from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., all communication must be asynchronous and passive, like email, rather than interruptive, like a tap on the shoulder or a phone call.
And the absolute king of toxic interruptions, the black hole of productivity, meetings.
Meetings are mathematically disastrous.
The math is genuinely terrifying when you map it out. If you schedule a standard 1-hour meeting and you invite 10 people, that is not a 1-hour meeting. You have just spent 10 hours of collective human productivity, plus the mental switching costs of stopping deep work, walking to the conference room, making small talk, and then trying to get back into the REM work cycle afterward. Is the vague agenda of that weekly status update really worth 12 to 15 hours of lost company time? Almost never.
Meetings convey an abysmally small amount of actual information per minute. They inevitably drift off subject, the agendas are usually vague or non-existent, and the most common outcome of a meeting is simply scheduling another meeting.
It's madness.
If you absolutely must gather people, you have to impose strict constraints. Set a literal timer for 15 minutes, invite the absolute minimum number of people required, always have a highly specific problem to solve, and whenever possible, meet at the actual site of the problem point to a real screen, a real product, a real piece of code. Do not sit around a mahogany table discussing abstractions.
And when you are solving those problems, you have to beware of the urge to be a hero. You have to actively look for judo solutions.
A judo solution is about leverage. It is about getting the maximum possible result with the minimum possible effort. When faced with an obstacle, humans naturally lean toward complex, glamorous, heavy solutions because they feel more impressive. If you need a bird's eye view of a landscape, the complex, heroic solution is to spend weeks training to climb Mount Everest.
Right.
The judo solution is to take an elevator to the top of a tall building.
Look at political campaign ads during an election cycle. They are the ultimate manifestation of the judo solution. A scandal breaks on a Tuesday morning. The opposing campaign doesn't spend 3 weeks writing a script, hiring actors, and shooting on 35mm film. They have an attack ad on television by Wednesday afternoon.
Is it a cinematic masterpiece? No.
It's usually slow panning black and white photos with plain text and a cheap, dramatic voiceover. Production quality is incredibly low, but it is good enough. Timeliness and execution completely trump polish.
But people instinctively push back on this. They want things to be perfect. They want to polish the feature for another month. The profound danger there is that long, drawn-out, perfectly polished projects destroy team morale. Momentum is the lifeblood of motivation. If your team is stuck in the trenches for 9 months without shipping anything, without showing anything to the public, they burn out and stop caring.
Which is why we have to acknowledge a painful universal truth. Human beings are fundamentally, comically terrible at estimating time.
It is a cognitive blind spot known as the planning fallacy. We always, without exception, estimate based on a frictionless, best-case scenario that never actually exists in reality.
Think about your weekend. How many times have you thought, I'm just going to quickly clean out the garage, it'll take 2 hours, and suddenly it's Sunday night, the garage is completely torn apart, and you are exhausted?
We've all done it.
If we cannot accurately estimate a simple weekend chore, how on earth can we predict the timeline of a 6-month multi-variable software project? We can't. Look at massive public works. Boston's Big Dig Highway project, 5 years late, billions of dollars over budget. The Denver Airport baggage system, 16 months late, $2 billion over budget. We aren't just off by a few percentage points, we are consistently off by factors of 2 or 3.
Because of this flaw, the only logical solution is to break massive projects down into tiny, digestible chunks. Do not plan a 12-week project. Plan 12 independent 1-week projects. Because if you mess up the estimate on a 1-week project, you're only off by a couple of days. You can recover. If you mess up the estimate on a 12-week project, you're off by months and the budget is ruined. You need quick, regular wins to keep the team's momentum alive.
So what does this all mean for when we actually launch? We've built this lean, epicentric, good enough product. We avoided the VC money. But how do we actually survive against massive, entrenched competitors who have millions of dollars and thousands of employees?
By entirely redefine the parameters of the competition. You do not beat a giant by playing their game. You decommoditize your product so that direct comparison is impossible.
You inject yourself into it. You make your unique perspective, your quirks, and your philosophy the actual product. If we look at Zappos in their early days, before they were acquired, they sold the exact same sneakers you could get at Foot Locker or the mall. The core product was a total commodity. But Zappos injected their CEO's absolute fanatic obsession with customer service into the DNA of the company.
Right.
They had no scripts for the call center. Employees were empowered to stay on the phone for hours just talking to a customer about their life. You couldn't copy Zappos by just selling the same shoes. You'd have to fundamentally dismantle and rebuild your entire corporate structure to match their culture.
Or consider Polyface Farms, the Virginia farm run by Joel Salatin. On paper, he sells chicken and beef. But what he is actually selling is a deeply held, uncompromising philosophy about clean, transparent, grass-fed, sustainable farming. Customers will literally drive 150 miles out of their way just to buy his meat because they believe in his way of thinking. Massive, mechanized agribusinesses simply cannot copy that authenticity. It cannot be faked.
You also have to be willing to pick a fight. Taking a stand creates passionate fans. Being the anti-something is an incredible, cost-effective marketing tool.
It frames the narrative instantly for the consumer. Dunkin' Donuts brilliantly positioned itself as the anti-Starbucks. They mocked the pretension. They ran ad campaigns making fun of the sizes like Venti and Grande, declaring, "Friends don't let friends drink Starbucks."
That's brilliant.
Audi took on BMW and Lexus by positioning themselves as the brand for actual drivers, not for old, stuffy executives who want to be driven. Conflict ignites passion, and passion drives loyalty.
But wait, if I'm building a software product or selling a physical gadget, and my biggest competitor suddenly releases an update with 20 new features, shouldn't I engage in an arms race? If they add AI integration and Bluetooth, shouldn't I add those plus 3 more features just to stay relevant? How is doing less not just a recipe for obsolescence?
Engaging in a feature cold war puts you permanently on the defensive. You become reactionary, letting your competitor dictate your product roadmap. Instead of trying to outdo them feature for feature, you should intentionally, strategically underdo them.
Underdo them. It sounds crazy, but the historical examples are bulletproof. Look at the bicycle industry. For decades, manufacturers spent millions adding gears, developing carbon fiber frames, and engineering high-tech suspensions. And then, suddenly, fixed-gear bicycles exploded in popularity in cities everywhere.
They're as low-tech as humanly possible.
One single gear. Sometimes no handbrakes at all. They won a massive market share by being simpler, lighter, cheaper, and requiring zero maintenance. Or look at the flip camcorder back in the day before smartphones took over. The dominant Sony and Panasonic cameras had optical zooms, complex menus, and swing-out viewfinders. The flip had one red button. It just shot video instantly. It dominated the market by doing far less, but doing the core thing exceptionally well.
If you try to build the iPod killer or the Tesla killer, you have already lost because you are allowing your competitor to set the parameters of the game. You are fighting on their turf against their strengths.
Instead, you should completely flank them by doing something massive corporations are absolutely terrified to do, outteach them.
This is one of the most profound strategies available to a small team. Most businesses focus entirely on selling their product or servicing their product. Very few allocate resources to actually teaching their audience.
I love the chef analogy here to explain this. Think about world-famous chefs, Mario Batali, Gordon Ramsay, Julia Child. They go on national television and literally give away their exact, closely guarded recipes step by step. They publish beautiful cookbooks detailing exactly how they run their kitchens and source their ingredients. Now, why aren't they terrified that someone is going to buy their cookbook, open a competing restaurant right next door, and put them out of business?
Because they intuitively understand that the recipe is not the business. The execution, the atmosphere, the tone, the hospitality, that is the business. By teaching, they aren't giving away the farm. They are building an incredibly deep emotional bond of trust and loyalty with their audience. When someone learns from you, they respect you.
Gary Vaynerchuk built an empire doing this with Wine Library TV. He didn't just run ads saying, "Buy my wine." He sat in front of a cheap camera and taught people about the nuances of different grapes every single day. Etsy runs extensive workshops teaching its sellers how to be better entrepreneurs and improve their photography. Small companies can afford to pull back the curtain and teach.
Massive corporations cannot.
Right.
Because every single public statement has to clear 3 layers of legal review, PR red tape, and brand management. They are culturally obsessed with secrecy.
So emulate the chefs. Share your cookbook. Let people behind the scenes. Consumers are deeply fascinated by the mundane realities of how things are made. Look at the sustained success of shows like Deadliest Catch or How It's Made. Seeing the sweat, the effort, and the raw process humanizes your brand.
And please, as you are humanizing your brand, for the love of all things holy, stop sending out generic press releases.
Oh my goodness, yes. Press releases are the equivalent of corporate spam. It is a formulaic, hyperbolic pitch sent to hundreds of cynical journalists who don't know you, filled with fake, manufactured CEO quotes and meaningless synergy buzzwords. It is white noise.
Instead, when you are small, welcome obscurity. We all want to launch on the front page of the New York Times, but obscurity is a superpower. When you are small and unknown, that is the absolute best time to test radical ideas. You don't have 10,000 angry customers scrutinizing a minor bug in your software. You can tweak your product, make embarrassing mistakes, and pivot safely in the shadows.
There is a beautiful Japanese concept introduced here called wabi-sabi. It is the aesthetic appreciation of the imperfect, the impermanent, and the incomplete. It values deep character and authenticity over a shiny, sterile facade.
People don't want perfect plastic flowers. They want the real flower that might have a torn petal or is just starting to wilt. Leave the poetry in what you make. Show the world your flaws. Launch the unfinished prototype. Speak like a normal human being in your emails. It proves you are a living, breathing person, not a faceless, flawless corporate monolith.
But as you embrace this authenticity, and as your company inevitably begins to find success and grow, you face the most dangerous transition of all. Bringing on new people without destroying the fragile, agile culture you have just built.
Hiring. This is where so many incredible, fast-moving companies suddenly calcify into slow, bureaucratic nightmares. And the first thing we need to do is throw the traditional resume straight into the trash.
Resumes are absurd documents. They are highly formatted lists full of exaggerated action verbs and unverifiable claims. Anyone can blast out 300 identical resumes in an afternoon on a job board. It requires 0 passion, 0 research, and 0 communication skill.
Exactly. If you want to know who a candidate really is, ignore the resume and read the cover letter. That is where you hear their actual voice, gauge their communication style, and see if they genuinely care about your specific company or if they are just desperate for any paycheck.
We also need to aggressively ignore the corporate obsession with years of experience. You see job postings all the time demanding minimum 5 years of experience. It's meaningless. The data shows that after the first 6 to 12 months of learning the baseline tools and software of a specific job, the experience curve flattens out almost completely. There is practically no difference in output between a smart candidate with 6 months of experience and an average candidate with 6 years of experience.
The differentiator is raw intelligence, adaptability, and dedication, not raw time served in a cubicle.
And formal education is similarly over-indexed in the hiring process. There is a fascinating statistic to consider. 90% of the CEOs heading the top 500 American companies did not receive their undergraduate degrees from Ivy League colleges. In fact, historically, more have gone to state schools like the University of Wisconsin than to Harvard.
Academia often teaches habits that are actively detrimental in a fast-paced business environment.
Like what?
Like the habit of writing 50 dense pages to make a point that could easily be made in 2 clear paragraphs.
Yes. Academia teaches you to use big words to sound smart, to be stiff, formal, and defensive. In reality, clear writing equals clear thinking. If you can't explain a concept simply in writing, you don't truly understand it. The golden rule of thumb here is, if you are deciding between a few equally qualified candidates for any role, whether it's a back-end programmer, a marketer, a designer, or a salesperson, always hire the better writer.
A good writer inherently knows how to communicate, how to omit the unnecessary, and how to put themselves in the reader's or the customer's shoes.
You also want to look specifically for what are called managers of one. These are individuals who do not need daily check-ins, heavy direction, or constant motivation. They set their own goals and execute them. They free management from the heavy burden of oversight.
If you hire delegators, people who just want to attend meetings and pass actual work off to others, they act as dead weight on a small, agile team.
And whatever you do, hire slowly. Resist the urge to staff up just because you had a good quarter. There is a brilliant analogy regarding rapid hiring the strangers at a cocktail party. If you hire a bunch of people really fast, your office suddenly turns into a cocktail party full of strangers. And what happens at a party like that? Everyone is unfailingly painfully polite. Everyone talks about the weather. No one brings up controversial opinions. No one wants to rock the boat.
Appeasement becomes the default state. And appeasement is absolutely deadly to a product's evolution. If everyone is too polite or too new to say, hey, this feature idea is actually terrible, you end up releasing mediocre, inoffensive garbage. You need a team that has worked together long enough to trust each other so they can engage in healthy, rigorous conflict without taking it personally.
Which brings us to the highly elusive, often misunderstood concept of culture. You see startups trying to manufacture culture all the time. They lease a cool brick office, they buy a ping pong table, they order custom Patagonia vests for the team, they hire a graffiti artist to paint a mission statement on the wall, and they say, look, we have a great culture.
This raises a fundamental question. Can culture actually be designed from the top down? The reality is absolutely not. You cannot install a culture like a software update. Culture is the natural, unavoidable byproduct of consistent behavior over time. If management consistently rewards honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, trust becomes your culture. If management consistently sends people home at 5 p.m. and doesn't email on weekends, a healthy work-life balance naturally becomes your culture.
You have to treat people like adults. Stop policing their internet usage. If an employee spends 20 minutes watching YouTube during the day to clear their head after a deep work session, the company isn't going to collapse. When you install surveillance software, block websites, and require managerial permission for every tiny expense, you create a culture of non-thinkers. You create a resentful parent-child relationship instead of a team of peers.
And when mistakes inevitably happen, which they will, because you are moving fast and treating people like autonomous adults, how you handle the damage control publicly defines your culture to the outside world.
The rule is incredibly simple, but very hard for egos to swallow. Own your bad news. If something goes wrong, if the server crashes or data is lost, you have to tell the story before someone else does. There's a classic comparison here between the infamous Exxon Valdez oil spill and the Ashland oil spill. When Exxon spilled 11 million gallons of oil, their chairman waited 2 weeks to even visit the site. They hid behind lawyers and PR spin. It was a masterclass in cowardice that cemented them as corporate villains for a generation.
Contrast that with Ashland oil. When their massive storage tank ruptured near Pittsburgh, their chairman, John Hall, immediately flew to the scene. He took total, unconditional responsibility, held press conferences answering every question, and pledged to clean it up, regardless of the cost. Within a day, the media narrative shifted entirely from evil, negligent corporation to good company trying to make things right.
And when you apologize to your customers, you have to actually apologize. You have to avoid the conditional 4-letter words. No corporate non-apologies like, we apologize if you were inconvenienced.
A true apology accepts total responsibility with no conditional phrases attached. The word if implies you don't really believe they were harmed, you're just humoring them. The word inconvenience minimizes their actual crisis. You must explain exactly what happened, why it happened, and the specific mechanical steps you are taking to ensure it never happens again.
And speaking of toxic language, we have to talk about the absolute worst 4-letter words in business. These are words that silently kill projects and destroy morale. Let's look at need and must. Like, we need this feature, we must hit this deadline.
Using need creates a false absolute. Very rarely do you actually need something to survive. It shuts down creative alternatives. If you say, we need to build a new database, you stop looking for ways to just optimize the old one.
And what about the word easy or just? Can't you just add a button? It should be easy.
Those words are incredibly disrespectful to the person actually doing the work. When a manager says a coding task should be easy, they're minimizing the unseen complexities of the engineer's job. Just implies the task takes 2 seconds, when in reality it might require rewriting an entire back-end system. It builds deep, silent resentment.
And fast. We need this done fast. When you demand something fast, you are implicitly demanding that corners be cut. You are sacrificing the epicenter of quality for the sake of an arbitrary calendar date. And finally, the ultimate toxic 4-letter acronym, ASAP.
ASE is pure poison to an organization's workflow.
It really is. As soon as possible. It sounds so harmless, so urgent, but it's incredibly destructive. When a stressed manager starts putting ASA in the subject line of every single email and request, they are declaring that everything is a top priority. And when everything is a top priority,
nothing is a priority. It is inflationary language. It completely devalues every other task on the board. It creates artificial hysterical stress over things that simply do not matter in the grand scheme. If a weekly analytics report is a day late, nobody is going to die. But ASA forces employees to drop their deep work, reset their REM cycle productivity, and scramble in a state of panic. You must reserve emergency language for actual, literal emergencies.
So let's pull all of this together. We have journeyed through this massive, paradigm-shifting stack of insights. We have completely dismantled the cynical excuse of the real world. We've exposed the statistical myth of learning from failure, and we've seen why long-term business guesses are dangerous blinders. We've learned why staying small is a powerful destination, why constraints are your greatest creative ally, and why the hot dog is the uncompromising epicenter of the stand.
We have redefined the very nature of productivity by fiercely protecting the alone zone and eliminating the mathematical disaster of toxic meetings. We've learned to flank our competition by intentionally underdoing them, out-teaching them like master chefs, and embracing the wabi-sabi authenticity of our own imperfections. And we've seen how true, resilient culture is built organically through treating people like autonomous adults and owning our mistakes with absolute honesty.
It is a completely different map. It's a map drawn on a napkin with a thick Sharpie marker, but it actually guides you safely through the jungle instead of into the quicksand. But there is one final, incredibly provocative thought from this framework that we have to leave you with today. It's about the very nature of inspiration itself.
This is perhaps the most urgent, actionable takeaway of all. We often treat ideas and inspiration as the same thing, but they are radically different. Ideas are immortal. An idea for a book or a business can sit in a notebook for 10 years, and when you open the notebook, it's still the exact same idea. But inspiration is highly perishable. It is like fresh fruit. It has a strict, unforgiving expiration date.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now and you feel a spark in your chest, if you are suddenly inspired to finally scratch your own itch, or to slash a bloated 6-month project in half, or to finally cancel that toxic recurring status meeting, you cannot wait until next week to do it. You cannot put inspiration on a shelf and say, I'll get to that when things slow down.
If the inspiration hits you on a Friday afternoon, you cancel your plans and dive in that weekend. Because when you are riding the high of genuine inspiration, you can accomplish 2 weeks of grueling work in 24 hours. Inspiration is a literal time machine. It is the ultimate productivity multiplier. But it will not wait for you to be ready. If inspiration grabs you, you have to grab it right back by the collar and put it to work instantly before it evaporates.
We spend our whole lives thinking we need a perfect, pre-printed, full-color map to navigate the professional world. We think we need permission, VC funding, and endless meetings. But it turns out all you really need is a thick Sharpie, a healthy disrespect for the real world, and the courage to take the very first step right now. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Go build something real.